Good morning, and thank you, Alberta Environment and Parks and Environment Canada and Climate Change for the opportunity to be here this morning. This will be a co-op presentation with my colleague David Spink, who's been working with Fort McKay on air issues for a long time. This is a very good opportunity for First Nations and especially Fort McKay, the most impacted First Nation in the oil sands region, for us to present our views and perspective on the air, water, and in general monitoring in the region, and especially anything that relates to Fort McKay. We've had some challenges since the implementation or start up of JOSM, which became AEMERA later on. So we had some challenges in terms of being asked to participate in a program where the program was pre-designed and we didn't have too many opportunities to be part from the very beginning, including the design of the program. We were asked to, here's the program, can you help us to implement? So McKay had an issue with that because, although traditional knowledge is a very important component of any monitoring, McKay has more to offer than traditional knowledge. And quite honestly, as we're going to see through this presentation, we only got attention on the air quality and odor issues in McKay after we were able to get real data, good information, technical information on the situation. Since the implementation of REDA, in 2012, we believe that Fort McKay has had more difficulties in participating in the regulatory process. And, at this time now, we believe that environmental monitoring for us is one of our last line of defense in terms of protecting our Aboriginal and treaty rights. And we made a decision to try to implement our own monitoring program in Fort McKay and the Fort McKay Moose Lake reserves, 60 kilometers northwest of Fort McKay. So fortunately, into 2013, through a partnership with Environment Canada, we were able to get what I call a state-of-the-art mobile air monitoring station. It's been there since then, and it's been providing very good, very important information to Fort McKay. And also, we've just installed an air monitoring station at Moose Lake. It's a solar-powered air monitoring station. It's just started like a couple of weeks ago, and we are about to start our own groundwater and surface water monitoring program. We're going to start at Moose Lake, but eventually we're going to go to other parts of the Fort McKay Reserve. The history of the odor and air quality in McKay, it begins in the 60s, or began in the 60s. McKay has been dealing with the issue for a long time as more and more oil sands development arrived in the region. Odors are now a normal part of the community life, and it should not be. Over the years, the community has tried to get the problem looked at, but with no success. And as we're going to see here, only after we started getting results from this environmental monitoring station we got some attention after we showed the data to the AER. So at times the air quality in the community was so bad that residents were worried about their health, and they wondered if they should evacuate or not. So that was one of the main concerns. I've been in McKay for 5 years now, and I know of at least 2 or 3 occasions when they had to leave, and so many other occasions that we were asking ourselves, do we have to evacuate or not? And that was a serious question to us, because who was supposed to tell McKay in an event of any incident in a company around McKay, and depending on their emissions and air condition, that McKay residents should evacuate or not. So, so we've been complaining with the regulator for years, and as I said, since the installation of this air monitoring station from Environment Canada in 2013, we've been collecting the data, and we've been able to demonstrate what's happening. When a major event occurs, we go to that station and we read what's telling us, and then we can see precisely what's happening. What's coming, where it's coming from, and how much, and which compounds and elements. So that's what we did in after a significant Odour event occurred in McKay in September 2014. We initially had a meeting or 2 with the industry. We expressed our concern over the situation. We were asked for 6 months for them to review the information and get back to us. And unfortunately, after 6 months, in a meeting that we were supposed to review the information and get more information from industry, unfortunately not was presented to us at that time. So that's when we got, we went really concerned, and we went out and said, okay, we have to do something different here. So fortunately, we got the attention of the AER through Dr. Monique Dubé, and so the AER initiated a formal review process, and that process included a lot of data collection and interviews with companies, Fort McKay, environmental monitoring agencies and groups, and in September this year, the 21st, they officially released the report in Fort McKay in a press conference in Fort McKay. So the main objectives of that investigation was to assess the recurring complaints in McKay involving human health, air quality, and odors, to determine the existence of technical gaps on understanding the issue and recommendations toward resolution. So the investigation included a time period of from 2010 to 2014, and it related to the odor complaints from the Fort McKay residents at that time. The AER received during that time 172 complaints, and 165 were related to odors. In that same time period, the AER conducted 523 investigations. But those investigations were not, there was no relation between the numbers of investigations and the number of complaints. For example, in 2013, there were 17 odor complaints from Fort McKay, and the AER conducted 135 investigations in that year. In 2014, there were 65 odor complaints from Fort McKay, and the AER conducted 83 investigations. So there was no correlation between the number of investigations, although they are, quite high, but they are not directly related to odor complaints, air quality complaints in Fort McKay. So you can see on the map, that investigation was done in a 30 kilometers radius around Fort McKay. You can see McKay is at the center of the oil sands development. So it included Suncor, Syncrude, CNRL. Total was not included because the project has been deferred. Imperial project was not included as well, but they responded to the questionnaire that the AER sent to the companies. So we can see in this graph the types of odor complaint. So 60, I think it's 68, I can see from here, 68% related to hydrocarbons and ammonia, hydrocarbons and sulfur. And contravention of approved limits are related to, can't remember, NOx and SO2 events. So these are just some of the graphs that were prepared by the AER showing NOx emissions, SO2 emissions. So it shows the location and the significance or size of the emissions per operator in the region. For VOC, so we can see the biggest contributions come from Syncrude, Suncor, CNRL, Shell, and TRS. So I'll stop here. I'll have my colleague Dave speaking about the 17 recommendations made by the report. So essentially, McKay had 4 main issues before this investigation was conducted. So the first one was emergency response. As I said, we needed a definition of when to evacuate. And there are recommendations related to that. We had issues with the AER process of responding to our complaints. And sometimes it was really, I mean, we had no hope in how the system worked at that time. We would call and, we would call the AER, we would call the companies, oh, everything is okay, there is no problem. And yet, we would feel and smell very badly. We feel it, and everything from reported was okay. There was no problem. We had a problem with the policy, especially because there is no standards for odor. I mean, there is no conditions on any EPA approval related to odors. So if anything has to change, it has to be through the policy change. And finally, the health implications of the air quality and the odor in McKay. So I see all this research and information being provided on monitoring, but at least for Fort McKay, we haven't seen anything related to what is the most important component, I would say, of an environmental monitoring, which is to protect the human lives. And that's a big issue in McKay. I think we have a recommendation in this report for a human health assessment in McKay. And Dave is going to go through the 17 recommendations here.
We have impacts, and one of those impacts, as Alvaro has outlined, are odors and poor air quality events in Fort McKay that raise concerns and health and well-being issues. And that's what the AER and Alberta Health in this review, Recurrent Health Complaint Process review, looked at. And it was a screening level look, and the report is very clear about that, but it's a 275-page screening level report that came out. And what it tried to do was look at some of the gaps and uncertainties and some of the needs around better understanding and addressing these issues. So 17 recommendations, and as I say, I can't go through all of them, but certainly some of them relate to work that JOSM is doing, and the hope is, and I'm sure AER has the same hope, that some of these recommendations will benefit considerably from the work that has been and is being planned. So there's some recommendations around emergency response, and I'm going to skip over these. Responding to odor complaints has been a big concern. It's been a little bit haphazard, and so there's some recommendations regarding that. But recommendation 5, connecting odor events to specific industrial sources or events has been difficult, and Stuart is already getting ready to drag me down here. So that's an important one. There's another one related to that, and it's understanding odor and air emissions. And I think we can benefit from some of the modeling work that Environment Canada is doing in that regard. A key recommendation, recommendation 10, of course, at the end of the day, what Fort McKay wants is better air quality, and that means better management of the emissions that are creating these events. And I'm going to skip right to the end. Well, recommendation 13, very important. These odors, people are concerned about their health. Is there a concern? How do you address that concern? And recommendation 17 is how do we go about implementing these recommendations? There's going to be a task force. David Borner mentioned this morning that he's the Environment Canada rep on this task force. It'll have representation from all the stakeholders and 4 working groups to get into the specifics about implementing those recommendations.